America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone.
I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
We shall never surrender.
Welcome to the War Kitchen's first ever Christmas special. In this series, we will take inspiration from the downtrodden who lived through hard times in Victorian England to cook up some holiday-themed recipes that are well suited to hard times. The Victorian era in the United Kingdom is well known for the vast developments in changing the political and economic structure of its people. It also boasts some of the best-known writers of our time, such as Charles Dickens. Most of Dickens's books focused on the plight of the poor citizens of Britain, how they lived, what they ate, recreational activities, and the very few options that were open to the less fortunate during these times. Christmas, of course, was an important celebration in the lives of the Victorian people, rich or poor, and still remains so today. Though today the Christmas holiday might not be as significant by comparison, to the people of the Victorian era, the Christmas season was something that everyone, regardless of social status or economic situation, could look forward to all year long. In this series, we are going to focus on the recipes of the Victorian era as seen through the eyes of Charles Dickens. The Christmas feast was indeed very important in the lives of the rich and the poor, as it was the highlight of the holiday. Usually being served after the religious services for the day, the Christmas feast was a great way for everyone to come together. For the more affluent, the food would have been lavish and extravagant. For the main course, it was very typical to have some kind of wild game or fowl, such as a roast goose. However, for the everyday person, or the less fortunate, the meal would have been a bit simpler, but still greatly appreciated and celebrated. It would include rabbit or beef instead of a goose, or even turkey or ham, and would have been accompanied by root vegetables that were common at the time, such as parsnips, turnips, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. But for today, we will start with a main course. As I mentioned, the Victorian poor typically ate rabbit or beef for their Christmas meal, which can be duplicated in today's world. However, in keeping with the theme of a low-cost meal that can be prepared in our modern times, where we have to deal with things like shortages and high prices, we will have to make some modifications as usual to make this recipe a bit more fitting for today's world. In today's marketplace, rabbit is pretty hard to find in most major grocery store chains, and even if you can find it, it will certainly be very expensive. So for the main course, we will choose spiced beef. Our historical recipe comes from Mrs. Beeton's book of Household Management, published in 1851. This was the go-to cookbook of the day, and no Victorian household was without it. But as is common when trying to recreate historical recipes, what was cheap and easy back in the day isn't so cheap or easy in today's modern world. The historical recipe calls for a significant amount of beef, which makes sense as it would have been needed to feed a large household. The recipe also calls for an arduous process of rubbing, marinating, and rotating the meat over a period of many weeks before eventually baking in a wood-fired oven, low and slow for several hours. Obviously, not many people have weeks, a wood-fired oven, or the patience with which to make this simple entree, so we will modernize this recipe to reduce the amount of time involved and substitute ingredients that we have available today. So let's get started with our Bleak House beef. The very first thing you need is the beef itself. This can be a round roast or sirloin roast that is approximately 4 to 6 pounds in size from your local supermarket. The round roast is usually cheaper, but sometimes you can find a sirloin roast on sale, particularly around the holidays when grocery stores and butchers need to make room for more common and more expensive meats. Whatever you choose, round roasts or sirloin roasts are both readily available everywhere and should certainly be less expensive than most other meats at the butcher. Next, we add the spices. Now, depending on what you're able to find and your budget, you might have to make some substitutions. For instance, in the Victorian era, juniper berries were extremely common and very, very cheap, but in today's grocery store, you might not be able to find them. So you can go by this list and see what you can find. After gathering your spices, combine them together in a bowl. If you are able to get some of the more rare spices, you might need to crush them up using a mortar and pestle. If you don't have a mortar and pestle, don't worry, you can just do the best you can to crush up some of the larger components so that they mix well together. Once you have your spices all ground up as fine as you can get them, place in a small bowl along with some olive oil and mix well. Next, we marinate the beef. Take your spice and olive oil mixture and cover the roast on all sides. Once all covered up, place the beef in a covered bowl and put it in the refrigerator to marinate overnight for at least 12 hours. After the marinating is complete, take the roast out and place in an oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit or around 200 degrees Celsius, and cook until the meat is to your liking. If you prefer rare beef, as is more traditional in this recipe, cook 10 minutes for every 1 pound of meat. For medium, cook 15 minutes for every 1 pound of meat, plus an extra 20 minutes at the end. Spiced beef is usually served rare to medium rare and cold to best bring out the flavors of the meat and the spices. But as always, make sure to use a thermometer to check that the beef has an internal temperature of at least 145 degrees. And there you have it, Bleak House beef. You can serve it cold, as is traditional, or you can serve it warm. Either way you choose, you will have a hearty main course that perhaps puts our modern times into perspective. As is the case with most recipes that we cover in the War Kitchen, we might look at this and think this is just a simple roast. But for those who have lived through harder times than we, this dish is a delicacy that people look forward to all year long. And even though living through our modern times isn't getting any easier, a simple roast can remind us to be thankful for what we do have. So thanks for watching, Merry Christmas, and we will see you next time.